Guys, hear that okay? Let me know in the chat if you can. I think that's a little better. So today we're going to be talking about soloing over the blues. All right, so that was just a little example of what we're going to go over. Let me get this set just a little bit lower. There we go. So basically, we know how to play some blues lines, hopefully by now. If you don't, I have several lessons on it. Some of them are live lessons, and some of them are just particular blues songs that you can kind of go and learn. But basically, we start with something like a bass line, right? That's what we normally do. But occasionally someone might give us a solo in a song. It's not going to happen a whole bunch necessarily on bass, but if they do, rather than just being like, nah, I don't want a solo, it might be nice to have some things that you can do. So we're going to be talking about using the blues scale to do this. We're going to be talking about doing the Mixolydian mode over the blues as well. And then we'll be talking about some techniques and things that you can do within those to spice it up a little bit, including some slides, some bends, and just kind of mixing up some other modes with that. So we might throw in a little bit of the Dorian mode to give it a little bit of flavor. So if you like videos like these, hit the thumbs up, let me know. And if you have any questions, you can always leave them in the chat. So let's go ahead and jump in. So first of all, we got to know what key we're playing in. So that example that I just did a second ago has that stock bass line that you've probably heard on many songs, but it's in A. So this doesn't mean we're completely in the key of A major. We're not using just that set of notes. We're going to kind of use some other notes in there. So for instance, if we had the A major scale, we're going to flat the 7th note of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to lower that 1 fret. That's what it means to flat a note. So that would give us the A Mixolydian mode. So we could solo using the A Mixolydian mode over that, and then when it changes chords to the D7 chord, we could go to the D Mixolydian mode as well, and then go back and just literally do nothing but that, and every one of those notes would work with the chords. It would sound pretty good. It wouldn't be bad. But yeah, I still haven't gotten batteries. You're correct, Seth. Sorry, that cracked me up a little bit. But yeah, I need to order some off of Amazon or something. But you could do that, but that's not a super bluesy sound to be playing the Mixolydian mode all the way over the blues the entire time. So instead, what we really want to use is the blues scale starting out. So does anybody here already know how to play the blues scale or a minor pentatonic scale? If you've gone over some of those, I have some lessons on minor pentatonic. I believe I have a lesson on the blues scale as well, but if not, I'm going to go back and make one. But if we're playing that key of A, we're going to want to use the A blues scale, and that's going to sound something like this. And if that's too high up on your neck, we could also play it here. It just requires a little bit more shifting. But let's go ahead and use that second one that I gave you. So basically, we've got the 7th fret on the D string, then the 10th fret on the D string, we've got the 7th fret on the G string. Then we've got the 8th fret, then the 9th fret, also on the G string. Then we'll have the 12th fret, and then we'll have the 14th fret. So we're going to solo only using those notes for right now. So we've got our blues, and I guess I deleted it off of there. What I might do is I might do a different pattern because that one's pretty busy. So just to give us even more room, I'm just going to do a very, very simple blues. That's probably too simple. So I'll do the twice as long version of that. 3rd, 4th. Now we're going to go up to D. Back to A. To E. To D. To E. So now we've got that. So we could have a chord that's not important right now, so I'm probably going to leave that out. But just to give you an idea. So we've got that. Now we can solo. So all I'm doing is using notes from that blues scale. And you can see that a lot of them are even in the bass line. So the notes that are in the bass line, we've got an A, we've got a D, and then at that very end, we've got D, D sharp, E. And so those are just in the bass line. So the idea, the reason I'm telling you that is when we're playing the blues scale and we're over one of those chords, one easy way to kind of stick with the changes is to center your lines around those notes. So if you know you're over the A chord, resolve to an A. So start with an A and end with an A over that chord. And then if you get to a D chord, just center your lines around D. So let me give you an example. So this is A right now. See how I started on an A and ended on an A? So here's D. But you see I started on D and ended on D before going back to A when the chord changed. So knowing when the chords change gives us a little direction. A. We know we're still on A. See, that's an A too. Now we're on a D. Now we're on an A. E. A. See, most of that is built around an A. So that's one way to do it. Just really center around those notes that are just the root notes of the chords when you're on them. And then kind of go up a note, go back a note, add a little bend, add a little hammer on, pull off thing. But when you're over each chord, try to resolve it to the chord you're on. So let me know in the comments if that makes sense to you or not. So now I'm expanding into the lower octave of the A blues scale. So let's go over that. That's going to be the 5th fret on the A string. Then we've got the 8th fret on the A string. So 5th, then 8th. And then we've got the 5th, 6th, 7th frets on the A string. And then we've got the 5th and the 7th fret on the D string. So that's our whole scale. Okay, so we've got that octave of it and this octave. So the reason we're not doing this lower octave for most of the solo is because you can tell it kind of clashes with the bass line since it's in the same range. So a really important thing to keep in mind is it's nice to keep most of the notes an octave up from the bass line so that they don't clash. Yes, you're talking about playing out a little bit and playing kind of slightly in key. So sometimes people call that playing out, but we got to learn how to play in before we can really play out, right? So right now we're learning the rules, then we can kind of like add some exceptions in. But yeah, a lot of people do that and then resolve back into the key eventually. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing there. I'm going to stop the blues for a second. The blues bass line. So check this out. Practice playing those notes and then practice playing the lower octave too. And once you have those two down, we can kind of go back and forth between them. Right? So we can kind of do that. And the techniques that I'm using within there, I'm doing some hammer-ons. What's kind of fun to do a hammer-on between is the 4th fret, sorry, the 5th fret, the 6th fret, the 5th fret, the 6th fret, and the 7th fret, which is of our key, it's the 4th scale degree, and then the sharp 4, and then the 5. So that's why I was kind of trying to say 4. But in this key, we're just going to play the 5th fret, 6th fret, and 7th fret. And we can kind of hammer on. It's kind of fun to do that. So when I'm hammering on, I'm hitting a note with, I'm plucking the note with my right hand on the 5th fret. And then I'm just putting enough pressure down with my left hand to get the 6th fret and the 7th fret notes out. So hopefully that makes sense. And then you can also do the opposite, which is called a pull off. So you can push down both frets at the same time, keep both of them down on the same strings. This would be like the 5th fret and the 7th fret. And so even though I'm only playing the 7th fret note first, I'm already ready to play the 5th fret note next. So I play that 7th fret note, I pluck it, and then I just move my finger off, and I kind of moved it down just a tiny bit. So it's almost like plucking the string while leaving my pointer finger steady. So I'm pulling off from the 7th fret to the 5th fret. So that's kind of fun to do too. So you can hammer on, or you can pull off. So those are some cool things that you can add now that you've got the blues scale to kind of go along with that. So the blues scale is really similar to the minor pentatonic scale. And if you know the minor pentatonic scale, you'll already kind of see this. But if you don't, the minor pentatonic scale would be like the 5th fret on the A string to the 8th fret, then the 5th fret on the A string to the 7th fret on the A string, and then the 5th fret on the D string to the 7th fret on the D string. So 5 and 8 on the E string, 5 and 7 on the A string, 5 and 7 on the D string. So all the blues scale is really adding in is this note right in between that 5th fret on the A string and that 7th fret on the A string. So that note is what makes it sound really bluesy, and it's important to throw that one in when you're soloing over the blues periodically, just so that it doesn't just sound like a minor pentatonic solo. You actually have that blue note in there. We refer to that as the blue note. So that's why I'm making sure to use it a lot. And a lot of times when I use it, I like doing hammer-on pull-off figures. So I'll play the in this case, the 7th fret on the G string, and then I'll hammer on to the 8th fret and then pull off. You could also do that down in that lower octave like we were talking about. So that would be the 5th fret on the A string, then hammer on to the 6th fret and then pull off back to the 5th fret. So that's kind of a cool little figure. If you don't feel like doing the hammer on pull off, you could slide from the 5th fret to the 6th fret and then slide back down. So that's kind of a cool one too. You could also bend into that note. So when you bend a note, you're changing the pitch of that note higher. So if you bend it just right, just the right amount, you can bend it up to the pitch that the 6th fret would be. So get that pitch kind of in your ear, dun, and then try to bend the other note to where it matches it. Dun, and then let it go. And make it 3 separate motions so that it sounds like this, but a little bit smoother. You can bend up or down. For me, it was just easier here because you got to bend it kind of far on the U bass. So I just had more room on the neck to do that. But honestly, bending up is probably a better choice. So that's what it would sound like in the lower octave. And then the higher octave, it would sound like this. So one thing to keep in mind is if you have the round wound strings, they kind of roll under your finger. So when you go to bend it, it might start under your fingertip, but then when you bend it up, it might be lower down on your finger. So you just got to kind of get used to that. But that is something to keep in mind. All right. So I'm reading the comments here. Let's see what we got. When you solo on a blues line like that, your thoughts on when a good note solo should bend a string on, if you know what I mean. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. When a good note in the solo, you should bend a string. Yeah, so I think that bends are kind of, it's kind of fun to kind of bend into it and like hold a note out too, right? And then kind of bend back down. So it's kind of fun from an accent standpoint. Yeah, so sometimes you can bend when you're accenting, but you're just kind of, a lot of times it's into that blue note because it just kind of adds a little flavor to it and it really brings out that you're throwing the blue note in there. You can bend to other notes in the blues too, though. It's just a little bit harder on the U bass. It's a little easier on guitar because right here we're just bending a half step, right? We're just bending from the 7th fret to the 8th fret pitch. We're not going from the 7th fret matching the 9th fret pitch, which hurts a little more. So you may not want to do that as much. But yeah, sometimes it's fun to bend it and then hit it a few times while it's bent too. Right? But it's kind of hard to do, once again, when the strings roll under your fingers. So it happens less with the flat wound strings, but the flat wound strings have higher tension, so they're harder to bend physically. You have to put more force behind them to bend those notes. Okay, so what I would do, though, I gave you a lot of information there. To start out, I would just loop a bass line or, find a backing track. You could probably find a backing track on YouTube pretty easily. And right now we're doing a blues in A, so you could type in blues in A backing track, right? And so then you let that play, and first just play up and back down the blues scale. So I'm going to do the lower octave first, and it's going to clash a little bit because it gets muddy when you're playing in that lower octave with the bass line. But just to get comfortable with it, this pattern's easier to move around than this pattern. But the reason I'm teaching you this pattern up here is because if we tried to play the other pattern, which was this, but starting over here, you'd either want to have a cutaway or you'd have to do something weird like I just did where I raised the bass up so that I could reach those notes. On a bass guitar, you wouldn't have to, though, and I would probably just play all of this in this position starting on the 12th fret, if that makes sense. Right, so blues in A, it's the same as the one string challenge. You could literally record the that bass line. and then literally solo over that as well. And you could also do the blues scale on one string if you really wanted to. It's just going to require a lot more shifting. Right? Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff you can do there. But for now, I just want you to play up and down the scale. So just literally straight up. And then wait for a second. Play straight back down. And you'll notice there are certain notes that sound good over certain chords and certain notes that don't. So just kind of use your intuition to know which ones to play and which ones kind of sound bad to stick on over certain chords. Some add a little flavor if you go to them quickly and come out of them quickly. But if you just kind of hang on them, it can be a little too much tension sometimes. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. The higher octave. You do the lower again. So you can see there are certain chords where it's like, if you're going to the E chord, a lot of those notes don't sound as good, and you want to stick to stuff like the E over those notes, or sometimes even play a note that's out of the key. Hey, Sean. Glad you're enjoying the live streams. Okay. And then you can mess around with the rhythm, but still just go straight up the scale and straight back down the scale. Right? Oh, I hit a note that wasn't in the scale. So you could just you go all the way up both of them, then back down both of them. See, that sounds fine and it sounds melodic. But then we can add those little parts that match along with the bass line. So you could try just playing your bass line in these positions to know when the chords change. Right? And so then you can keep a direction going, you know, and there's certain notes that work really well over each chord. Apparently I can't talk and listen to that at the same time. So basically, if you're playing over the A chord, pretty much all those notes will work, but you don't really want to hang out over the D note. So A, C, D, D sharp, E, G, A. We don't really want to hang out on D when we're playing the A chord unless we're temporarily just adding some tension. So check this out. If I were to play this over the A chord and just play nothing but D, it doesn't really sound great. But if I were to play either an A or an E over this, it'll sound pretty good. And the C doesn't sound too bad if the chord underneath it isn't playing too loud on like the guitar. So basically you can get away with the A and the E the most. The G sounds pretty good over it too. But we don't really want to stick and hang out on the D note. And we don't really want to hang out too long on the D sharp note either. So let me give you an example of what happens if you just played all the wrong notes. They're not really wrong, but you just played all the notes that weren't in the A chord over this, how that would sound. Right, there's just nowhere to go. Yeah, but now we're over a D chord, so that D will work over the D chord. But try to make your lines start and end on an A, an E, or the upper A up here when you're over the A chord. And then when you're over the D chord, it's kind of cool to center everything around D, go up one note, back to D, back down a note in the scale, back up to D. And then when you go back to A, you want to do A and E, you're good. And it doesn't mean you can't play the other notes. It just means you don't want to sit on the other notes at the beginning of your phrase or at the end of your phrase. So I'm going to play through it and tell you what note I'm kind of hanging on the most over each chord. So just listen for where the change is. So here we're starting on the A chord, so I can get away with playing A and E the most. So you'll hear I play the other notes in there, but I only sit on the A and the E the most. Then on the D chord, I'm staying on the D mostly. Now I'm back to A, so I can play the E or the A. Now I'm on the E chord, so I'll probably just want to play the E there, and then on the D chord, I can still get away with those other notes. Then at that very end, it's going from an A and then walking into an E. So we just got to be really quick on going to the E chord. So does that make sense, or do you guys have any questions about that? Okay. So the E key is what you would use for the bridge of a blues song in A. So honestly, I don't really think about the blues as having a complete bridge section, right? So the bridge is just here that's just like one chord. So I don't know if I would call it. Let's see. Okay. Well, that's unrelated to playing, so I'm not even going to acknowledge that comment, but thank you, I guess. But yeah, so I wouldn't consider it a bridge. Like over the blues, there are kind of sections, but it's almost like you have three groups of four measures. So you've got your one chord for 4 bars at the top, then you've got your 4 chord for 2 bars and your 1 chord for 2 bars. And so that's kind of the middle of the song. And then the last time through, you kind of go through the 5 chord, the 4 chord, then the 1 chord, and then you usually have some sort of turnaround at the end. In this case, our turnaround was where we're just walking into the 5. But it's a good question. So that's kind of the basics of it. So if you can do that, you'll probably sound good on the blues just by knowing that over the original chord, like the chord of the key. So like if you're in the key of A and you're playing over the A7 chord or just the A chord, then you want to play the root of that chord and the 5th of that chord the most within your soloing on there. So directionally, you can play the other notes, but you want to kind of start or resolve to either the root or the 5th, which in this key happens to be an A or an E, right? So then when we're on the 4 chord, the best note to resolve to is D, but it's kind of cool to do this little surrounding thing. And we can also get away with playing an A in the D chord because there is an A in the D chord. So that's just something to kind of remember, is that it's okay. You can also kind of resolve to an A over the D chord, but it sounds a little bit better to wait since you're usually going right back to an A chord afterwards. So hopefully that makes sense. Thanks, Wendy. Maybe so. I've actually never had any other issues with people saying super unrelated things during the live stream, so not too worried about that. But if people say unrelated things, then I kind of just hold them usually for the end of the live stream, and hopefully they'll ask again at the end. But we want to try to stick to this blues idea for now. So that's how we use the blues scale over it. If we were to use the Mixolydian scale over it instead, then it wouldn't sound quite as bluesy. Is the basic difference. So it would almost have this kind of like kind of a floaty sound over it. So let's try it. Let's try that out. This time, instead of playing the blues scale, I'm going to play the Mixolydian mode and kind of make up a solo with that. You'll see it doesn't sound as kind of like emotion driven or something. Okay. So you kind of hear that it's just too happy or something, too major sounding. Can't seem to get my hair to stay out of my face. Sorry about that, guys. So the Mixolydian mode, in case you don't know, is a major scale with a flatted seventh. So if you know your major scale, that'd be like the 5th fret if we're doing the A major scale. 5th fret on the E string, 7th fret on the E string, the 4th fret on the A string, 5th fret, then 7th fret. And then on the D string, we've got the 6th fret. And then we've got the, the 4th fret, then the 6th fret, and then the 7th fret at the end. So let me say those again, just in case I messed that up. 5th fret and 7th fret on the E string, 4th, 5th, and 7th on the A string. And then in a major scale, we've got 4th, 6th, and 7th on the D string. But we're going to flat that 7th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to flat that note, which means go down 1 fret. And that'll be our Mixolydian mode, is that scale with the flatted 7 instead of the other 7. So for soloing over this blues progression with that, we've just got to know our chords pretty well. So if we're playing an A7 chord, then we'll have an A, a C sharp, an E, and a G in that chord. So that's a lot of the different notes from this Mixolydian mode. So you have a lot of places that you can kind of resolve to if you want to. You can resolve to an A, you can resolve to C sharp, or you can resolve to an E. Which of the Mixolydian mode, that's the 1st note of the mode, the 3rd note, and the 5th note of the mode. So basically our arpeggio. And then if we're doing a 7th chord, you can also get away with playing a G over that, although we don't want to stay on it the entire time. It adds a little bit of tension, so we don't want to add too much tension. And then when we're playing a D chord, we've got our 4th note of that mode, our 6th note of that mode, and what is it? And our 8th note of the mode, which is also the same as the 1st note. So when we're playing the D chord, or in the blues form, our 4 chord, if we're in a different key, we can just use that arpeggio, and if we kind of stick to those notes, we'll be fine. But you notice if you add the 7th to that chord, that note's not in the Mixolydian mode, but it is a note that's in the blues scale. So that's why certain notes won't work over the 4 chords. So if you're playing the D chord, you don't want to play that C sharp. So you don't want to play the 3rd of the A Mixolydian scale over that D note. You just avoid that. Okay, and then when we're playing an E, we really only have 2 notes that are actually in the chord that we can play. And that is the 5th note of the A scale, the A Mixolydian mode, and then the 2nd note, which is our 5th of the E, but it happens to be our 2nd of the A Mixolydian mode. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I know it's a little theory intense. But basically all I'm saying is when you're on the E chord, you can get away with playing an E and a B. And any other note will kind of sound a little bit out of place, or it'll add a little bit of tension. And if you want to add tension, that's great. But if you don't, you can kind of avoid that. So I'm going to do that again now that I've explained that, only I'm going to do it in the higher octave rather than the lower octave. Oops. So that way you can just hear it better, so it won't blend in with the bass line too much. Right? So it's a little out of place there. So if you wanted to, you could also do the Mixolydian mode of each chord, which means when you're over an A chord, you play the A Mixolydian. When you're over the D chord, you could play D Mixolydian. And when you're over the E chord, you could play E Mixolydian. But I think that might sound a little strange too. Let's try it out and see what happens. So we're over the A chord. Now I'll do D Mixolydian. Now we're back to A Mixolydian. Now E Mixolydian. D. So it's just a lot to think. Since the changes happen so quick, it's a lot to think about. So we can get away with that. We can make it sound good. It's pretty cool. But it's a lot easier to just play the blues scale over it and just know over certain chords, avoid certain notes and avoid hanging on certain notes. And then it's just like you can get away with doing the blues scale across the whole form. So does anybody have questions about what I mean by that? Have I lost anybody there? And Sean, if you're still watching, I know you said pentatonic a while ago. Yeah, so this is the blues scale, which is essentially a minor pentatonic scale with one extra note. So that's all I'm doing. I know you're a music teacher, so I know you already know that. I'm just saying that's what we're going over, in case you missed that. All right, so that's how we can solo over A. Now, I used a lot of times where I was talking about the particular notes, like a C sharp and a D and an A. But I also talked about the scale degrees, like if we're in a certain key, we're talking about the root of the chord being the 1 of the key. So if we're playing in the key of A is our 1. Then we got A, B, C sharp, D. D is our 4, and E is our 5 chord. So we can build a chord off of each one of those. So if we play an A chord, that's our 1 chord. A D chord, that's our 4 chord. And E chord is our 5 chord. So we're going to do this in a different key now. We're going to do this in the key of G. And that way, my upper octave blues scale can be played in that position instead of having to split it between two strings like that, because it's easy to play. And when I say in one position, I mean I'm assigning my fingers 1 to a fret 4 frets apart. So this would be the 10th fret, 11th fret, 12th fret, and 13th fret. And the blues scale will have 10th to 13th on the A string, 10th, 11th, and 12th on the D string, 10th on the G string, and 12th on the G string. And if you notice, if you have one finger assigned to each fret, that's your pointer finger to your pinky, then your pointer, middle, ring, and your pointer and your ring, keeping those fingers assigned to those frets. So it's a little bit tricky to play. And up here, I might actually sacrifice using my pinky and just use my ring finger so that my wrist doesn't have to curve out to play those notes. But that's the idea. But also have a bass line available separately. Okay, yeah, so we'll do that. We'll do that, Seth. That's a great idea. So what I'll probably do here is I'll play it, and then I might include this on my bass challenges page. I think I only had one entry on the one string challenge, unless some people have posted there and it just hasn't notified me. So anybody that's still interested in doing that one string blues challenge, you can go to the Facebook group. I believe it's UBass Challenge is the name of the page, and you can check that out. But yeah, this would be a good one to add too, just soloing over the blues. So I think you could either play your own bass line with a loop pedal and then play a solo over it, or I could record a bass line for you to solo over, and you just solo one time around the change. What about any jazz exercise? Today we're talking about the blues right now. As far as jazz exercises, I mean, you're playing over different chord progressions. So I think that'd be better for a different lesson. But we're gonna kind of stick to the blues today. But yeah, with jazz, it's about learning certain licks. There's one called the lick, and you can like learn how to play that in different keys and learn how to play. It's the same kind of thing where we're figuring out what mode to play with what chord. In jazz, you have to figure out what mode you're in or what key you're in. So if you're playing a 2-5-1, but then you change key after that, you play in one key over a particular section. Then when you switch keys, if it's another 2-5-1 into a different key, you'll change keys there and play a 2-5-1 there, or whatever the chords happen to be. But kind of some it's just there's a lot to it if we're talking about soloing over jazz. I think learn how to solo over blues first and then apply that stuff to jazz afterwards. But for today, we're just gonna mostly focus on blues. But yeah, jazz is really cool. It's just there's a lot more to getting started on it. Okay. So back to the blues. We're gonna do a blues in G. I'm gonna change the bass line up. So I'm thinking maybe something like that. Or I might do, how about I do a funky blues instead? I'm just gonna make something up. Hopefully I'll come up with it on the spot. We'll see what happens. Nope, didn't work. Yeah, I like that. We'll go with that one. Okay, so we got that. Okay, so let me just talk about what I was doing there, because I know I was just kind of like noodling. So we've got our bass line, and then it's the same idea with the chords. We've got our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and our 5 chord. So we want to resolve to notes that are in those chords. So with the G chord, I was playing the first note of the blues scale, and then I was playing a 5th away from there, which happens to be a G and a D. So those are good notes to resolve to. So my lines were resolving to those notes. Notice how most of the time I was either hitting a G or a D, and I was ending on it and beginning on it and hanging out on those notes longer than the other notes. The other notes were kind of short in between, and we're always leading to one of those other notes. Okay, and then when we go to our 4 chord is C. So I can play a 4th away from the root, that's C, or I could play the G, that's also in there. And if I'm doing a 7th chord, I could also play that note, which happens to be our minor 3rd of our blues scale, which kind of sounds out of tune on my U bass. But you get the idea, the intonation's a little off. So we can kind of get away with playing that note because it's technically in the C7 chord if we have a C7. Those are the notes of the C7 chord. So, so if I was playing over the C chord, I might go. So you got a C, a G, or that G, it could be that G, and then an E flat. Sorry, wrong key. We're in G, so you got a C, a G, and a B flat. Sorry about that. So for some reason, my brain went to C minor instead of C blues scale instead of the G blues scale. But the point is, you can play the root or the fifth in that chord or the seventh of that chord, and those are all in this particular blues scale, which is why you can get away with them and why it works well in this key. And then when you're over the 5 chord, that'll be a D in this key. And then what do we got? Boom, boom, boom. Then we got a C. If we had the note up here, that would be our 7. So we can get away with either playing a D or a C. And those are the only 2 notes that are actually in the blues scale. So we want to kind of revolve around those and try to avoid the other notes a lot, although any note that leads to those notes will probably sound okay. Right? So you can do little lead-ins to those notes. So that's pretty much it on that. So as long as we can keep that in mind over whichever chord we're playing. So if we're playing a G chord, we just got to remember our root and fifth of that chord. If we're playing over our C chord, we just got to remember we can play our root, our fifth, and our seventh, which whoops, happens to be a B flat. So that note. So we can get away with those 3 notes when we're playing our C chord. And then over our D chord, which is our 5 chord, we can really only get away with D and the 7th of that, which is C. So those are the notes I'm resolving to, and then everything else is just directionally getting from one place to getting from one of those notes to the other note in an interesting way. And sometimes I'll delay getting to the note to add a little bit of tension and stay on those notes that aren't in the chord, you know. So I was gonna say that aren't good, but really that aren't in the chord because they are in the scale. Just to add a little tension and then resolve it to those other notes. So here's an example of that. You get the idea. Okay, so that's just the idea. Occasionally I might hang on those other notes, like, but I'm still resolving it to an A over that A chord or an E. Either one of those notes is fine. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I haven't seen a lot of questions on the chat, but if you have any questions about that or just other ideas on the blues, let me know. I mentioned we were going to do one other concept, and that's like the Dorian mode over the blues. And the reason the Dorian mode can kind of work over the blues is because basically, okay, this is kind of tricky to explain, but when we're playing over the 1 chord, you know, we still got most of the notes in our blues scale. except we're missing our blue note. So what I like to do is really do Dorian scale plus the blue note. But the Dorian mode would be like a minor scale. So if you know a D minor scale, you go up to from the first note to the fifth note. And then you borrow the sixth note from, in this case, G major. So that's a raised sixth from what we'd normally have in minor. Instead of that note, we're playing this note, but that's too far up the neck, so I pull it back here. So I have to subtract 5 frets to get that onto the G string. And then we have the last 2 notes that are in the minor scale as well. Sorry. So that's our Dorian mode, and then I might add the blue note to that. And what this does for us is it gives us some extra notes over certain chords. So for instance, over the C chord, all of a sudden we have every note of C7 in this chord, because that 6 ends up being the third of the chord C in C. It ends up being the third of C, which is the 6th of G. I feel like I might lose you guys on that explanation, but just bear with me here. So if I were soloing using that, I would mostly just use the notes that are also in the minor pentatonic scale, and then just kind of add that one note into it. So we've got so you kind of get the idea. That's a little bit of a different flavor. The other thing that I might do is when I'm on the 5 chord, I might just temporarily add the third of that chord temporarily into it. And it doesn't work over any other chord. You notice it sounds bad right now, but when I get to E, it sounds good for a second. So just temporarily, you might be able to slide into that note when you get to the 5 chord. Right there. And right there at the end. And I like sliding into that note. Since it's a note that's not in the key, I like drawing attention to it just when I'm over that one chord. So that's basically how I get those different sounds. Hey guys, it's a live stream, so sometimes things are happening. I'm so sorry that the stream's out of sync. It might just be a slow connection over here. Hey, how's it going? So yeah, I apologize for that. I'm seeing that it's out of sync when I'm looking at the playback. It's about 2 seconds off or something. There's not really anything I can do about it though, so I apologize, guys. But thanks for telling me that it's doing that though. I don't think it's just you. I think it's just the limitations of my computer and maybe my internet connection. But thank you for joining me. I hope you're still getting something out of it. And maybe YouTube will be able to fix the syncing issues by the time it gets to be able to be a playback instead of the live. So hopefully that can help. Awesome. Yeah, take your U-bass. It's the biggest advantage, I think, of U-basses is that you can bring them anywhere. Cool. So you're doing Rock This Town. That one's a fun one. Rock This Town. I'm trying to remember the bass line, the specific bass line on that one. I used to know it, though. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for bearing with me on the technical issues. But basically, the things to take away from this are the blues scale can work over over all the chords. You just got to know what notes to resolve to in it. And basically the best way to get fluent with that is just to play over it a bunch. And your ear will tell you if something sounds bad, or if you don't like it, then to just kind of avoid that note over those particular changes. So if it's over a D chord and you're playing an E and you don't like the sound of it, then just don't do that. Or if you're playing an A chord and you're sitting there on that blue note on that, if you're playing a G chord and you're sitting there on that blue note, it can clash with it. So you don't want to hang on that note for too long unless you're trying to build tension, which, that's the other thing I want to say. Every solo, and I should kind of digress. So that's all the technical sides of stuff. But now every solo is kind of like a story. So when you play a solo, you don't want to throw everything and all these things into it right at the beginning of the solo, because that can kind of bore your audience. They get information overload, kind of like you guys probably have with all the stuff I covered with the Dorian mode, the blues scale, and all this other stuff. But if you start simple and then kind of develop it as you go, that's kind of a more effective way to solo. So for instance, if I were starting a solo, I'd probably hold notes out longer, kind of really get into them, and be a little bit more sparse, and then build up to where I'm playing faster stuff, because playing faster is another way to build tension. If you're doing a whole bunch of notes really quick, it's kind of like an emotional turmoil kind of thing going on. And then when you resolve it and go back to going slow, it can be kind of nice. So here's an example of how I'd craft a solo over just one 12-bar form. Right? But I might get busier the second time around. So you can kind of see what I did there. I built up to it and then kind of put the chops in at the end rather than the beginning. Because if you just try to hit everybody with a whole bunch of stuff up front, their mind will just zone out, because it'll be nothing but a flurry of notes for the entire solo. So kind of just having different textures of simplicity, kind of building up to an arc of a busier notes. And then at the end of your solo, you probably do want to bring it back down. Also for the rest of the bandmates, they'll know that you're ending your solo if you have that contour where you're slowing back down and bringing it back down. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I think that's basically all you need to know to solo over the blues fairly effectively. But you're going to have to play around with these different components and just decide which ones you like the most and which ones you don't, and start to develop your own style over it. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know now, and I'm going to answer some questions at this time. So as far as was it Navix music covers? Do I play anything other than bass? Yes, I do. I play ukulele, I play guitar, I play piano, a very tiny bit of trumpet, maybe like in middle school band I played that. So, I might have a middle school to first year of high school ability on trumpet. So not a super amount. A tiny bit of harmonica and a little bit of drums, if I didn't already say that. But bass is definitely the main instrument. It's definitely my favorite. the U bass and the upright bass that's hiding behind me. It's pretty funny. I can sit right here and you wouldn't even know it's there. Okay, so Seth, question: since basses don't have tremolo bars for soloing like electric guitars sometimes do, is there a way, in your opinion, to get the effect on any bass while soloing? Depends on what you're trying to do with the tremolo bar, and it depends on if you're willing to bend the neck of your bass. So on the tremolo bar, if they're diving low, really the only way I can think of to do that, and I don't really recommend this on a U bass because I don't know how strongly these are attached, and even on a bass, Billy Sheehan will do this occasionally where he'll hit harmonics and then he'll bend the neck. But yeah, on a hollow body instrument, I don't think it's a good idea. But like on a bass where the neck is attached separately by something more than glue, you can kind of use it like a whammy bar, and then tremolo bar, whammy bar, and then you can kind of get away with that to get the lower notes, but to get the higher notes, I'd just bend, So if you're doing the part of the whammy bar that, you can just bend to get that part, but to get the lower notes, there's not a great way. If you want to bend an open string, you can push down behind the nut. Although I've never done that on the U bass, and I feel like it might not be good for all the components if you do that. So you can do it, but probably don't. So hopefully that helps. Do you have any electric basses? Yes, I do. In fact, I'll go grab one right now so you can see it. I have, I have more than one in here. Maybe I can get the other one out in a second. I've played electric bass the longest. So this one is the one I like to play the most right now. And it's a Squier, and don't let that fool you. I know a lot of people are like, Fender is so much better than Squier. And while that's true, this Squier is the classic vibe jazz bass. So it gets a fairly awesome tone, although right now I seem to have the EQ all out of whack. Let me get a little more low end on the PA system. That's right, I'm using a PA system and not a bass amp. That's the other reason it's a little thin sounding. So that's my Fender Jazz sound out of the Squier. So that's my gigging bass. I play this at shows a lot. Then I also have a 6-string bass if I can get it out of the case, but it's been having some issues with the with cutting out, and I don't feel like it's a battery issue. I feel like it's a someone said it might be the what did they say? The preamp in the bass might be going bad. So if it cuts out, that's why. But Warrior is a brand actually based in Georgia. So it's in this lovely case. They build amazing instruments. So this is a 6-string Warrior. If you know someone named Adam Nitty plays these, or he used to play these until he got a deal with Ibanez. I also have an Ibanez 6-string, but that one's a cheaper Ibanez 6-string. This is Warrior. So right now it's not cutting out, but after like being on for 5 minutes, it starts cutting out. So I do have a fretless 6-string Ibanez as well. And that one, somebody else removed the frets, and then a professional went back in and fixed the neck. And it has an issue right now. So I have a fretless 6-string, and then I have another Ibanez 6-string that's not fretless. And basically with fretless, it's nice to have the fret markers because that's where you want to play over. So you know how when we play on on fretted instruments, we're playing in between the two pieces of metal. When you have a fretless instrument, if it has the little markers where frets would normally be, then you want to be right over the marker, right over where the fret would have been, instead of in the middle. Because what we're doing by playing here is we're shortening the part of the string that's vibrating from the bridge to that piece of metal right here that we're pushing down just behind. So if you don't have the piece of metal, your finger has to do that. And that's the idea on fretless, is you just got to be really accurate on that aspect of it. So it takes some getting used to, but it's really cool. And as far as ones I'd recommend, I had the Squire fretless jazz bass for a while that looks like it's ripping off Jocko's. That's a pretty good starter fretless if you wanted to get that. If you want to get something more expensive, I mean, it really depends on what sound you're going for. A fretless jazz will have more of a Jocko kind of sound. There's a brand called Zahn that Michael Manring plays. And man, those things just have this I don't know, they have a very unique sound. Just a lot of purr to them. The strings kind of, on fretlesses can kind of purr. Those just have a really nice smoother sound, whereas Jocko's is a little more aggressive. And so playing on a jazz bass, you're going to get a little bit more of an aggressive tone. But it's also the way he plays that makes it aggressive too. So hopefully that helps a little bit on what to dig in on. Right, a 6-string bass versus a 4-string. And then I have a 5-string as well. I have a 5-string Schecter. And that Schecter was modeled after a jazz bass. I can get that too, but it'll take me a little bit longer. So just bear with me for a second. That one doesn't have any problems. But I stopped playing it because I started developing some wrist issues. And it was neck heavy. So having to hold up the neck the whole time just kind of wore my arm out. And so I'd rather have one that kind of stays balanced. Also, the 6 strings do that too in a different way. The 6 strings might require you to bend your wrist a little bit more to get around that extra string on the bottom to be able to reach up for the E string and the B string. So because of that, you just have to alter your technique. And sometimes it's a little hard to do. So I found that playing a 4-string is just still more comfortable for me. So let me get that 5-string out real quick. So that was my main bass for a long time, was the 5-string. All right. So this was my main bass for a long time. Schecter, they called it a Diamond Series California Custom Shop, which is kind of interesting because, the California Custom Shops with, well, the batteries might be dead in this one, so I may not be able to show you how that one sounds. It's kind of a bummer. Yeah, so the batteries are completely dead in this. But it has EMGs. And if you want to hear how this one sounds, I have videos on the channel that are just like more than 3 years old, maybe 5 years, 4 to 5 years old. And if you go back to like my very first videos on the channel, I think I was playing this one as well. And there's a video somewhere, if you scroll back through all my videos, you'll see it where I just kind of talk about all my basses. I talk about the upright bass and I kind of introduce you to all of them. And it was before I even had a U bass. So yeah, I have a lot of electric basses. I've been playing electric since I was 10, since I basically around my 11th birthday, right before my 11th birthday. So I'm 31 now, so 20 years. So I've been playing electric bass for 20 years now. Yeah, I can play the upright for you for a minute. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I've got all of them. Might as well play all of them, for you. Okay. So I've got enough room. Let's get this chair out of the way. There you go. Try it with the bow for a minute. Okay, so there's a little bit of bow too. All right. But yeah, the upright's a lot of fun to play as well. So hopefully that was fun. And then 4, 5, 6 are more better. Basically, I used to prefer a 6-string. That's why I ended up having 3 of them. But after a long time of playing them, they were kind of hurting my wrist. So basically, I just kind of stopped playing the 6-string altogether and got that 4-string Squire jazz bass at the beginning of the year. And since I got that, it's got the tone that I want, that classic jazz tone that I've been wanting for a really long time. And it's been perfect for the wedding gigs that I've been playing. And the wedding gigs just came back. So I actually use that almost once a week now at this point. Although, you know, weddings are a little bit different with COVID going on. A lot of people wearing masks and stuff. And I try to wear a mask, but every now and then we get lucky and we're playing outside under a tent. And I feel like you're on stage, you're more than 6 feet away from people. So I've been fortunate in that sense. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out. Okay. So Navix, thanks for hanging out if you're still there. How hard was it for you to learn the fretboard on the upright bass personally with no markers versus a fretted or fretless bass with fret markers? Okay. So fret markers certainly help when you're playing upright bass. Your intonation might be a little bit out. You got to use your ear a lot more. But the other thing you've got to use a lot more is positions. So as you notice when I'm playing, I have certain positions that I'm doing, and I'm shifting in very specific spots. And then you notice that I play more harmonics. So sometimes I'll use the 12th, where the 12th fret harmonic would be on an electric bass. It's a little further up than where the body starts. It's like right here. You can see that. So I'm pushing the harmonic down right here. And basically, that's kind of like a U bass, you know, where the 12th fret's right where the body starts. So you can picture that kind of with a upright bass. It's a little bit into the body at that point. But you use things like where the body starts on my bass. If you were to put your thumb on the back, your pointer finger would be lined up with a D. So they call those D neck upright basses. So that way I have like the open G string. I know if I do that, I can find D on the G string very easily. And then from there, I'm using positions to stay in tune up until I get up to that 12th fret. You probably already know that, but you have to rely a lot more on positions, I think, to stay in tune. And you got to use your ear a heck of a lot more to fine tune. So yes, it's a lot harder. Your positions only have 3 notes. You don't ever spread your fingers out until you get past where the 12th fret is. You don't really ever spread your fingers out like you would on electric bass. We're doing 1 finger per fret. We pretend that the ring finger and the pinky are like 1 finger when I'm playing on there. I'm sure you're aware of all this. With your dad being such a like awesome upright player, I'm sure that you know about this. There are different techniques, and there are some upright players that use their ring finger on its own a lot more. But the method I used was like using the samandal, and that really keeps you using these 2 as 1 finger, basically to help you push down the string a little bit easier up until you get into thumb position. And thanks for tuning in, Seth. I appreciate you always being here and asking questions and keeping things relevant to the live stream. Let's see. We got James has a question. Anyone else having synchronization issues with the video audio? Yeah, that's I think it has to do with my computer and my internet connection. So I apologize for that. One day I'll be able to upgrade that, and then maybe we won't have that problem anymore. Awesome. Well, it was a great question, Seth, because I think it's very informative for the other people that haven't played an upright bass before. So hopefully that helps a little bit. All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. And yeah, so obviously I like playing all these different instruments. It's just the U-bass is obviously more portable, so I love that about it, of course. But each instrument has a benefit. I think the biggest benefit of the upright bass is acoustically, you can't beat the feeling you get from playing that. So you just get this vibe. You have this giant instrument resonating with every note you're playing, and you really feel every note. And so that's a really, really cool thing about the upright bass. The electric bass, it has more frets, so I can go higher up when I'm soloing and kind of do some different things. It's easier on the 6th string to do some tapping stuff, and then obviously with the U-basses, portability is a big thing, but they also have a very unique sound. So, when you tap on the rubber strings, it almost sounds like the Blue Man Group hitting PVC pipes. So I really like that, and I want to experiment with that more. But it might be really good for techno or something, electronic music. But I haven't written an electronic song with the U-bass yet, so I need to go back and do that because that'd be fun. My Facebook face challenge. I should add a face challenge. I know what you mean with the bass challenge, but what would the face challenge be? How about a bass face challenge, where you play and you try to act like you smelled something really nasty, and then you automatically just play more funky when you do that. So that's the bass face challenge. Maybe we'll do that on there at some point too. But thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all you guys, and I will see you on the next one. So I do this every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, United States. And I also release a video every Tuesday if you haven't checked those out. And I might start releasing another one, like a small, simple tip kind of thing throughout the week, but I'll let you guys know about that. But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something. If you have any other questions, if I kind of breezed through something earlier and you're like, what's this mode or what's this scale? It didn't quite make sense. Feel free to leave a comment below on the playback and I'll get back to you. All right, guys, take care for now. I'll see you next week on Tuesday and Thursday.